Folks, do you sit on the couch at the end of your day looking forward to relaxing and watching something good, and instead you spend about 25 minutes switching between all your different streaming services just trying to figure out, what do I watch? Well, if that happens to you, there's a podcast created specifically to solve your problems. That's right, it's called Watch This Tonight. 3 times a week, former film critic, film producer, and now podcast producer Dan Benamor, he offers a curated list of recommendations for the best in streaming in bite-sized episodes that will give you a quick answer to that eternal question, what should I watch tonight? So look for Watch This Tonight from Voyage Media anywhere you listen to podcasts. And now, the body count continues. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Dying Time is here. That's right, we're talking about Barbarian on Kill by Kill. Greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from the lovely suburbs of Detroit. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where we are dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. We're going to unpack all the gory details of 2022's Barbarian, in the hopes that a overnight stayer's untimely end is just the beginning of the jokes that we might make at their expense. And as always, there's only one person I trust, that if I need a late night bottle of wine, she'll make sure I'm in the room before she opens it. The one, the only, Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
I mean, that's just the thoughtful thing to do. I may just have a granule of cyanide in my pocket, or I made sure to pack my emergency roofie kit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you got to have that with you. You have to be prepared. It's the Boy Scout motto: always have your granule of cyanide with you.
Oh, ABR, always be roofieing, baby.
I guess so. Before we go too far into Barbarian, of course, there's the very real possibility that not everyone in the audience will have watched it at this point. Although by the time this drops, the film will have come out on HBO Max and will be available digitally to rent. So they will have the opportunity. They may not have had the chance. So before we go into spoiler territory, perhaps as we do with recent releases, we talk in non-spoilery ways for a brief moment of whether or not we recommend people go out and see this particular film. Gina, what say you?
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, you definitely need to go into it completely unspoiled. I saw it in the theater about a week or 10 days after it came out, and I was thrilled that somehow Twitter did not spoil it for me. I did not know what to expect going in. Completely did not see what was coming. I think that it is probably one of the, other than like Hereditary, probably one of the best horror movie trailers I've ever seen, in as such that it's completely misleading. Which, like I mentioned Hereditary because if you were to watch the original theatrical trailer for Hereditary, it would, you would assume that Charlie, the younger child in the family, is sort of the focal point of the movie. And that you kind of got like a creepy kid movie happening. And then like the movie just kills the shit out of her within the first half an hour. Like you don't even, there's no possible way you could see that happening going by the trailer alone. And
Yes.
there's kind of a similar thing here where the movie takes a very unexpected hard turn, and then it takes another hard turn after that, which
Yeah.
is also unanticipated. So as far as no one could come away from this movie saying that they saw any of this, they predicted any of this. I mean,
Mhm.
horror movie fans love talking about how they knew it was going to happen, and there's no original horror anymore, and it's all just it's just all ripoffs. And it's like, no, you can't pull that with this one.
Yeah, it is using your expectations against you, and that is where I think the film's greatest source of originality is. I think it's really lensed well. I think if I had known in advance of seeing it that Zach Kreger was from The Whitest Kids You Know, and his previous film experience was Miss March, I would not have anticipated anything happening in this motion picture. It's not exactly, while The Whitest Kids You Know is funny, I wouldn't exactly call it groundbreaking. And Miss March has to be one of the most miserable film experiences I was ever forced to sit through. So that's not exactly a recipe for success. And where I feel Barbarian is at its best is it is remixing elements of other films in a very original way. And that is its strength. To state, in my opinion, where it is getting those sources is a spoiler unto itself, and we will get to that eventually. But I will say that it was insanely confident and a very fun ride. And I agree, but probably seeing it in the theater would probably be the best way. And of course, we can't all do that, um, partially because Barbarian's access is going to get cut off from movie theaters as we go here. But I think some of its presentation would work best in a room that's completely dark because so much of it is actually kind of dark. Like, I don't think this is the movie that's really going to do well for people watching it on their phone.
Oh, no. Or watching it on like a a tablet on a plane or anything like that.
Right. Yes. I think that it really requires some of that because of the actual contents of the movie, not just because I'm being a film snob. I really do feel like this really benefits from being in a very, very dark room. So that I would encourage people, if you still have the chance to go see it in a movie theater, this is well worth your time and attention to do that. I think the performances are also top notch, and there's so few performances in the film that if you have one bum move, if you cast this wrong in any of the roles, they would just stick out like a sore thumb because there's so few of them to catch your attention. So the care here and the dedication to the premise and everyone working towards a very singular goal, I think is pretty amazing that this existed, that this was allowed to come to fruition, and it has to be celebrated. It's just a fun, grody flick that plays with mood very well.
Yeah, that this is been a pretty remarkable year for horror.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not been, with the exception of the commentary track we're going to record after this, there really hasn't been any clinkers in the bunch. You've
Yeah.
had X, you've had the new Scream, you've had Pearl, you've had Smile, which I have not seen yet, but I've heard mostly good things. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to that. And you have this. You have a lot of the original movies that have shown up on Shudder this year, and
Yes.
it's just been very, very solid. Not just just good movies, like original movies and movies that
Yeah.
take well-worn tropes and kind of put a new spit and polish on them, and it's really, really exciting to see. Like, anybody
Yeah.
that's still out there complaining that there's no new good horror is just looking for an excuse to complain.
There was an article the other day that I believe ended up on Total Film, and the premise was because Halloween Ends did not do as well as its previous two entries, that somehow people hated legacy horror. In the same year in which Scream ruled an entire month, that Hellraiser, the new one, literally rescued the franchise, that Prey rescued its franchise. There were conversations for weeks online that people don't like legacy horror. They only like these new original things. It's like, oh my God, this is the wrong year to do this. Like we will, if you want to hear our discussion on Halloween Ends, we are going to record a commentary track as we have for all the Halloween films, and that will be coming up. That being said, one swing and a miss for some, others have enjoyed it. Does not in any way, shape, or form, like that franchise, that 3-film trilogy has earned over $500 million. There's just no way on earth people are like, well, I didn't care for this one, so therefore legacy horror is dead. I'm only going for original films. We can have both. And guess what? We have had both. That's the nice thing about this year. It's been well-rounded. As you say, it's just a good year for original stuff. Like Shudder has had some fantastic stuff. And of course, one of the other films that we haven't mentioned that has been kind of a cause celeb is Terrifier 2.
Oh, right. And, yes.
That, while it's weird to say this, but Terrifier 2 is technically a legacy horror because it is a sequel to a film. Now that film's only 3 or 4 so years old, and I think this was only kind of delayed due to the pandemic and whatever. That being said, like it's had that amount of time for that original film to kind of gain an audience. And Terrifier 2 is delivering something that Barbarian wasn't, and that Smile wasn't, and that Halloween Ends wasn't. And so you're getting this wide variety of types of stuff that you're not getting everywhere else. Like, as you said, like Shudder, they have Resurrection, which is a very psychological horror film, but I think well worth everyone's time. It is gnarly emotionally. And then you have like stuff like VHS 99, which is a great little anthology film. That VHS, set of films always manages to come up with some, like, there's no true stinker in the VHS sort of franchise, and this one manages to continue that, which I think is pretty wild. When we eat well, we kind of have to celebrate it. I don't feel the need to line up all these movies in a row and start knocking them off to see which one was better. I just, come on, man,
and this isn't even a situation like remember Eddie Murphy Raw, and he's talking about like when you've been eating when you haven't been eating well, and then you have like Ritz crackers, and you're like, wow, these are the best crackers I've ever tasted. It's like where your judgment is sullied because horror supposedly has been so underwhelming that when you have a good run, right? When you get a good run, that maybe you're in your mind you're perceiving them to be better than they actually are. No, horror has been pretty good for the past decade. It's just that particularly this year, it's just really reaching heights that we haven't seen since probably the mid 80s.
Yeah, I think a lot of it kind of comes down to that the amount of good stuff in a very short period of time. When starting from that sort of like when Prey comes out to Halloween Ends, Terrifier 2, there's just a one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other that are just kind of really high water marks. And I apologize to the audience if you hear eating in the background. That is my puppy who cannot be in the rest of the house right now. He has to be with me, and he is eating. Like us, we're enjoying this meal of fine horror. So That being said, Barbarian, well worth everyone's time. It is Kill by Kill approved as a motion picture. And so for those who have not seen the film and want to remain unspoiled, and we would suggest you do that. Sometimes it doesn't much matter. Here, I think you will enjoy the thrills and spills unspoiled better, but that is up to you. But from this moment on, we will get into spoiler territory in 3, 2, 1, pause and come back to us. And Gina, this movie, I think one of a lot of people have talked about its originality, and I do believe that it is original in many, many aspects, but it also speaks to a particular point, and that is not nearly enough people saw Don't Breathe, I guess, is my question.
Well, did Don't Breathe, did that get theatrical release?
Oh, yes. It did very well.
Really? Okay. Because
Yes.
I don't remember it being in the theater at all. I thought it was like
I remember it's one of my favorite theaters experiences in the last decade, honestly, because it was one of those movies that one of the reasons I like seeing horror movies in a theater is it forced the audience, instead of being loud, to attempt to be quiet, because they are feeling the tension of not making loud noises on screen, and they're like, and you can feel like everyone gets small as they try not to make heavy popcorn eating noises, because and that added to the tension of the piece. And I would assume there were in a theater, people were shrinking instead of it being like a loud comedy where the more laughter you get, the more the communal experience.
Well, I'll tell you, when I did see Barbarian, yeah, I mean, certainly, from a personal level, I was very much kind of curled up in my seat and kind of like cringing and
Sure, yeah.
anticipation. But when the first big reveal happened, which would be Bill Skarsgård's character,
nice guy Bill Skarsgård.
Yeah, just having his head smashed like a cantaloupe against a solid stone wall.
Yeah.
People started laughing, and I started laughing too, because it was just like, oh, holy shit, like, what the hell is this? And like just that sort of tension release, like
yeah,
because. And when looking back, it's like, of course they were misleading the audience. It's it's like, how could I not see this coming? That
because it's Bill Skarsgård,
right?
Because that kid cannot win.
Yeah, it's like, it's the guy, I mean, who has done other roles in his career that aren't necessarily immortal child killers, but
right,
he'll always be the it guy, and it's I don't want to say it's a shame, because he's probably got a Scrooge McDuck money room from playing the it guy, but he's just so, even as himself, he's just so distinctive looking, and he's got those kind of weird eyes, and he's about 7 feet tall, and I'm thinking to myself, like what else have I seen him in? And I was like, he was in Castle Rock, and which he wasn't necessarily the villain in that, but you were made to believe that he was.
Right, but he is an evil entity, or at least versions of him are, along the beam, if we're going to get into Stephen King universe speak.
Right. So it's hard to associate him as anything but a villain at this point. To me, it would be like if you put like Ted Levine in something in the mid 90s. Yeah. And you think, oh shit, it's Buffalo Bill. He's a bad guy. I mean, it's like no matter what, which is why it's funny now to see him in his like 60s or 70s playing these like rumpled cops. It's like, that doesn't seem, or
even like something like The Mangler, which is a contemporary of Silence, and he looks in Buffalo Bill shape. and he's walking around as a cop, and you're like, I don't trust this person. I don't trust this person at all. You know, all those affects that make him were so inherent to Buffalo Bill. He is kind of forever typecast in a certain way. And they definitely use this about Skarsgård against the audience. It is particularly aimed at making you question the kind of person he is. That's where the vast majority of the tension is coming from, because for that significant portion of the opening act, there's no on-screen villain. You just have to wonder what's going on, and it uses that against you so well. And this is where we kind of come back to, I guess, Zach Cregger obviously coming from a comedy background, and now we also have Jordan Peele in the world. The relationship between horror and comedy is becoming more and more apparent to people because of the mathematics involved. There's a certain math to making jokes, and there's a certain math to making scares. They're involuntary reactions that both kinds of stories are trying to evoke out of you. And so the math isn't terribly different, so long as the person who's telling the joke or making the scare is confident that that joke or scare works. And here, you know, I wouldn't say that he's somehow aping the style necessarily, so much as being very confident in how that formula, and I say that loosely because I don't feel this film is formulaic in that way, but there's a formula to how you grasp an audience and sort of manipulate them into feeling unease. And it's very apparent in Jordan's film. And I feel like Cregger does the exact same type of thing here. There's just a confidence that they know what they're doing, and when you that allows you to relax into the ride and enjoy the premise and the plot a lot more.
Well, what I particularly like about these scenes with Bill Skarsgård, and oh my god, I did not check Wikipedia beforehand. Unfortunately I forgot this actress's name. She's very
Georgina Campbell.
She's very good. I will say that one complaint that I have seen about this movie from people is that this character does a lot of dumb things. Including, you know, going back to rescue someone she's never seen before in her life. Right. But I'm like, people, how do you expect the plot to keep moving? She doesn't, you know, if the movie had, you know, if she, you know, movie had ended when she gets out of the house and, you know, the homeless man helps her run away. Yeah. And then it's like the end. You know? You had to give her a reason to go back to the house. And is it plausible? Yeah, you know, I mean, I'd love to say that, you know, if I was trapped in a house with a complete stranger and there was like, you know, a murderous third party there, if I managed to escape, I'd like to say that I would try to go back for the other person. I don't know that I would. I would certainly call the police and say, I have just escaped from a house. There's someone else there who might be in danger. But I don't know that I would personally go back and try to get this person myself. I mean, maybe that says something bad about me, but, you know.
I mean, it's true, but she does get the police involved to help her rescue this person. And the police are like, fuck this. Yeah,
you're making this up. This is, you know, even though she's like, you know, she's like shoeless. She's obviously been assaulted by somebody. And they're just like, no, we're not going to, you know, this is our coffee break. We're not going to help you. But, well, yeah, of course. I mean, you know, and a lot of, you know, what I was going to get back to with her and Bill Skarsgård's interactions with each other is it's funny, but also very realistic because she automatically feels like this is a dangerous situation, which, you know, she's right to. You know, he knows that she knows that he knows that she thinks she's in a dangerous situation. So he's embarrassed. he is trying to go out of his way to reassure her that, that he's not going to hurt her, that this is a situation both of them have been thrown in together. But
Yeah.
he gets and is not offended by the fact that
No.
she perceives him as a threat to her, which, I think that is, pretty cool and fairly forward thinking. He's not defensive. He's not going out of his way to reassure her, but he's trying to make her comfortable, but not in a way that feels sinister, or like we joked about that he's going to slip roofies in her wine.
Right. Yeah.
And then, they talk, and she kind of starts liking him to the point where, she takes a picture of his license, and like later she looks at the picture, and she's kind of got this, oh, he's kind of cute look on her face,
He didn't have to be nice.
Right.
He turns out to be nice. But she is being wary. Like, she's being actively wary of the situation she finds herself in. And so, yes, the other element here that I think the screamification of the horror genre is people go, don't you know you're in a horror movie? And folks, the vast, vast majority of people who are in horror movies, their characters are unaware that they are in a horror film. That just is not something they're aware of. And for her, she gets trapped in this basement. I had to read somewhere that it's 2 weeks later, because I did not know that. The film doesn't really give you dates. So they could practically be concurrent that another person enters the picture. But apparently it's 2 weeks later. So she's trapped in this basement thing for 2 fucking weeks. And finally, this other person shows up. And I feel like in her mind, the last thing she wants to be responsible for is leaving someone else behind to go through what she has gone through, which, of course, is weirdly a lesser trauma than anyone else who's been trapped in that basement. Because guess what? Richard Brake, cinema's leading, oh shit, if he's in this, something bad is going to happen actor, even more so than Bill Skarsgård. It changes the aspect ratio, and we go back to the 80s, and turns out he has been dragging women into his basement dungeon for decades. And now we have an X-Files
just
home situation.
Yeah, I was going to say, just making incest babies over and over and over.
Oh my God. Oh, Jesus Christ. Of course, now is a Hulkling. That's the other thing, is at a certain point when Mother, as apparently this character has been dubbed, burst through a cement fucking wall. Like someone has said, it's time for some high C. Just bursts through a wall and rips a homeless man's arm off and beats him with it. Like,
I don't know. I don't know how these 2 generations of inbreeding leads you to be super strong. But sure, why not?
Sure. That's the thing. Like, you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. And this is where I think the comedy of this really comes to the fore, because it's so outrageous. The difference between this being a horror movie and a straight up comedy is inches. And the same can be said for Get Out. The same can definitely be said for Nope. Us, to a certain degree, also has that. They're so close to really being hilarious comedies is inches away. And the difference is how you exactly tell that story. But they're both like causing these involuntary reactions, either a laugh or a scream. And like you said, when Skarsgård gets beat against the walls of a cave, you're laughing not because it's inherently funny, but it's the only reaction left to you, because he's been slowly tightening a noose around your nerves for what feels like an eternity, even, and then people leave and they come back to the bad place that you know is bad. They can kind of sense is bad, but they don't know for sure is bad. And oh my God. Wow. It's a really fun fucking magic trick, this motion picture.
It is, because when she is going down this like endless hallway underground, it's literally like a labyrinth down there, and and she can hear the like Skarsgård has disappeared at this point because he has volunteered to go on ahead and see what's down there, because she has found a room with a camera in it that it appears that people have been murdered in there. And he is, gallantly volunteered to check things out. I mean, I don't think that he needed to do that. I would not expect anyone to do that. I would be like, okay, why don't we just leave together and go find a hotel somewhere?
Yes.
This is not my house. I don't need to find out what's, in this basement that I didn't know, this secret hidden, entirely other, underground house in the basement. And you can start hearing him, calling out for help. And it was like, okay, this is how he traps her. This is how he traps her. And it's like, you can and then he, pops out and you're like, wow, he's doing a really great job of looking completely terrified. what a great actor this guy must be in order to have this extremely elaborate trap to get women into his underground lair. And he's like, there's something in here. And it's
a setup punchline.
Right.
It's a setup.
And it's like, and she's going to reach out to him and he's going to grab her. It's like, nope, but something reaches out and grabs him. And like I said, just smashes that head like a watermelon.
It is it's a fun fucking flick. I mean, the structure of it is worthy of examination because it's so simple, but all the tension comes from, putting Georgina Campbell's character in particular positions where you feel like this is not going to end well, and then releasing her from it. She's in this house. It's overnight. There's doors opening and she can sense that something's off. She leaves for a job interview and the whole time like, well, don't fucking go back. And she goes back. She gets trapped in the basement entryway and cannot get into the main house. She's rescued from that. And you go, don't go back. And she goes back. She goes into the, maze underneath the house and manages 2 weeks later, apparently, to get out. And you're screaming, don't go back.
Well, the funny thing is another great instance of misleading the audience is this homeless man who, when she does try to get into the house, he starts running at her and yelling, don't go in there.
Don't go in there.
Right.
Don't go in there.
And she thinks, oh, here's some crazy homeless man who's coming to bother me. And no, he's warning you. He's the only one that actually knows what's going on in there. Yeah.
I think it's one of those that's going to really reward the rewatch.
Oh yeah, you're going to see. I'm positive that there are a lot more indicators of what's actually happening that you wouldn't have noticed the first time around because you're so focused on whatever is happening between these two characters who we think are the protagonist and the antagonist. And the antagonist turns out to be the first victim we see in the movie. And like I said, it's very much like Hereditary in that regard, where the trailer has the trailer focuses entirely on a woman is trapped in an Airbnb with a stranger. Yeah. And it's like, she is, but not that one. There's an entirely different stranger that she's trapped in this Airbnb with.
So I both Georgina and Bill give very, very dedicated, controlled performances that are really structured well. And then we add to this the sort of third member of the triumvirate, and that is Justin Long, leaning into that fear that underneath the nice guy veneer, he's the worst person you've ever met. And this has to be somewhat like if you're talking about casting someone against their type. This is one, and I feel like this has been done over and over and over again with Justin Long, going back a decade to Drag Me to Hell, where he's supposed to be the nice boyfriend, but deep down, he's kind of not the nicest boyfriend in that. And then here, he's this happy-go-lucky, I've got the world on a string actor who just happens to have sexually assaulted his co-star and is real mad that he's gaining any sort of repercussions from it at all.
Right. Well, yeah, that's the other thing that the movie does a good juxtaposition on is that he is a bad guy who thinks he's a good guy.
Yes.
And whereas Bill Skarsgård is a nice guy, a genuinely nice guy, and not the capital NG nice guy.
Yes,
who worries about being perceived as a bad guy, and
is aware his awareness of how that can come across is kind of like, oh, you're aware. But then when she says we need to get out of here, something bad is happening. He in that situation, he doesn't immediately listen to her. He's still in panic mode because he's been bitten. And so he does pay the price because he does not listen to her. And again, like throughout the movie, dudes do not listen to her.
No.
And they really do pay the price. Like Tess is telling people over and over again, this is happening. And guys are like, uh-huh. And then they end up smashed.
Yeah. Some of them deserve it. Okay, Bill Skarsgård doesn't deserve it. Homeless guy doesn't deserve it. Justin Long definitely deserves it for a number of different reasons.
Oh my God. Wow. I mean, she suffers so much at the hands of this man who, to a certain degree is trying to help, but is the worst help. We've had some bad helpers in the history of this show, Gina, but he has to be the worst partner anyone has ever had trying to get out of a bad situation.
Well, I think that he wants to help, but he also wants to be in charge. It's also, I think that the fact that he is the owner of this house, somehow did not know there was this entire sub basement to it. Right. I mean, this part with this tape measure is probably the funniest thing I've seen in a horror movie in some time, where he's, mildly startled to discover that there is essentially an entirely separate, second house full of rooms, underneath his house. But his first thought is, oh, does this mean I can charge more for this Airbnb? In this god awful neighborhood that looks like an atomic bomb went off in it, right? And somehow this is the only house in this entire block that's perfectly kept. Which I do have some questions about. Sure. Who was taking care of the house.
The Airbnb company is taking care of the house.
So they presumably did not know this whole separate secret part of the house was there.
I'm assuming no, but again, I've only watched it 1.5 times. I haven't watched it the full all the way through, but I was wondering if they were in on it somehow, or it's just that the invisible hand of capitalism is so callous. They don't care. They care enough to do the job that they're supposed to do, but I don't know how Justin Long came to owning this property as a profit motive. He obviously has never stepped foot in it before, even though he was born and raised in Detroit, because he says he's back in town to his mom, and she's like, "What? You're back?"
Well, and
And he's like,
also like the homeless man kind of suggests that this is something that is still happening.
oh
Even
yeah,
even though the Richard Brake's character is like this ancient old man who can't even get out of bed anymore. And
well, definitely Mother has been going out and trying to bring people back. Uh, it does make you wonder how often have Airbnb customers been dragged into the basement.
yeah, I'm just like, so, but yeah, going back to this tape measure scene, that's his primary thought is, does this count as square footage? And it does,
Yes.
and he's delighted. And just this long
Because
scene
everyone
of,
wants to have a house where they've got a already set up murder basement.
yeah,
That's a real draw.
and of course, the scene is so well done, excuse me, because it's funny, but also it's like, okay, he's going to pull this tape measure back and it's going to be covered in blood, or he's going to try
Yeah.
to pull it back and someone is going to be holding on to it in the other end. I'm so sorry. And it's just, it just, or it's going to spring back because, I mean, you've used a tape measure, you hit that thing and like, feels like it sliced your thumb off when it comes
Right.
back. There's just so many possibilities of how this could go. And you're just sort of, laughing both at the ridiculousness of, this guy just trying to pull this tape measure, and he's going further and further and further into this hallway and this collection of tunnels that keeps going and going and just seems impossibly long. And at no point does he stop and say, wow, how long does this go on? He's just like, he just keeps
oblivious.
pulling this tape measure along, and it's like, okay, how long is this tape measure for one thing? And it's like, okay, it's gonna snap back in some way or another at some point, and it's gonna like put his eye out or something, or it's gonna, someone's gonna be dragging behind it, or it's gonna get caught on Bill Skarsgård's corpse or something. And it's just the mind reels at how many different ways it could go, and it becomes funny.
Yes. I think the mind reels is an excellent way to put it, Gene, because this is an exercise in your mind doing a good half of the work.
Right.
Because you're thinking the worst way this can happen. And that's occupying half of your mind while you're watching the film set up various scenarios for it all to go wrong. And you know it's going to go wrong. You just don't know how it's going to go wrong. And the fact that it has the confidence to play that way is, a good portion of how people are responding to the movie. It's really good at dangling possibilities in front of you and then snatching it up in a different way.
Yeah. It's
oh my God. We've confronted this before, particularly in slashers. A bunch of characters who are so terrible, the idea is you can't wait for them to die. And we've often complained about it because those characters aren't nearly hateful enough to actually make a film entertaining. And another magic trick of Barbarian is Justin Long is not someone his character is not someone you like. You hate him almost immediately. And his ability to avoid death when he should be dying so many times becomes intriguing. That I think is really kind of the special sauce of this film, is it presents you with people that you think, I know how this is going to go, and finds ways, given that there aren't that many characters, of giving you something something you kind of expect in a way you never expected.
Right, because again, to bring it back to Bill Skarsgård's character, like, if you look at, like, you compare Bill Skarsgård to Justin Long, which one of these men do you think would last longer against a giant mutant incest baby? And
Right.
it's like, average size, relatively compact Justin Long, or 6'5" Bill Skarsgård. And like Bill Skarsgård, he's ambushed Like literally, like
Right.
like she just, and she's a she. The incest baby's a
Yeah.
she. Just grabs him by the back of the head, like splat right against the wall. Like he doesn't even have the opportunity to fight back. Whereas as Justin Long just seems to somehow keep just a hair's breadth close to death, and just manages to weasel out of it, just as he thinks he's going to weasel out of these, sexual assault charges.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. My greatest fear at a certain point in the film was he's going to get out of this, and the sort of, it's going to be cast as him rescuing Tess. And this is somehow going to overcome his misdeeds.
He's like, oh, he's a good guy after all.
Right. That's that this one thing is going to erase his other misdeed. And I was so happy when that didn't happen.
Well, no, because he's a liar and an opportunist literally to the very end.
Oh my God. Wow. It becomes like a joke at a certain point. And when he makes the decision, I'm going to go into this basement, but I heard a scream, so therefore I'm going to go in prepared. And he finds the tiniest knife to put in his belt.
Just this little like what's his face, Big John in Halloween Kills, where he's got the little
Right.
he picks up the little cheese knife to go investigate.
Well, it's compact.
It's the only part of that movie that I like is his little cheese knife.
No, I enjoy when the one cop shoots his partner in the throat, and we learned that night he made out with Laurie Strode. Oh God, no. Okay, see, that's where the comedy guy goes wrong, because you have a very successful comedy writer in charge of that Halloween trilogy, and it works for that first one, in my opinion, but then it really bites him in the ass in the back too, where he sets up situations that are clearly hilarious, and I'm supposed to take them seriously. So listen, it's not an automatic formula for success. Oh my God. Yeah, Justin Long, when he falls in that tunnel and the baby bottle gets extended down, it's grade A nightmare fuel. When I see those cages, when they turn the corner and see the cages, Tess is immediately horrified. Her head has done the math. When Justin Long's character comes in and sees it, he's like, oh, that's weird. Oh God!
Like,
you can't get saved.
Can I charge
to him?
Can I charge these as extra rooms? Am I?
All right. Someone like that's going to take a ding if this was some sort of underground dogfighting ring. That's bad. Like, no, it's so much worse. It's so much worse. Oh God! And the fact that this shit has happened like this fucking week, someone came to the cops and said, hey, my dad was a serial killer. And they're like, no. And then she goes to a different set of cops and says, hey, my dad was a serial killer. And like, all right, I guess we'll investigate. And they start finding remains in the backyard immediately. Like, this isn't science fiction, folks. The cops do not believe you. Their job is not necessarily to protect you, a citizen. It is to protect those who own property, everybody. So the system needs to fucking change. I say this as a property owner. The system has to change. And that I think there's a fair amount of people who will see this film and laugh at the cops not doing anything as some sort of divine joke, when in fact it is telling the truth, and that is why it's funny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's what works for me so much about this. I don't want to call it a relationship. This interaction between Bill Skarsgård and his character and Tess is in repeatedly acknowledging the awkwardness and the discomfort of the situation, It almost becomes that they're flirting with each other. Like, oh, if this was any other situation than this, we might be kind of into each other because, he has, something in common with, with her, her career aspirations that, he knows someone, connected with the company she wants to, the film production company she wants to get a job with. And, when he says that, he's like, yeah, sure, man, sure. And he's telling the truth. And, if they had met in a bar or something or on a blind date, they probably would turn into a couple. But, this situation is so, awkward and embarrassing. I mean, no man wants to be immediately perceived as a threat. Well, okay, I'm going to correct myself. Some men would be all
reasonable.
Would be all right, and maybe even enjoy being perceived as a threat by a woman. Most normal men, would prefer that not be the case, but they understand why that's the case. It's sort of like, I don't know. Have you ever had to drive a babysitter home? And
oh yes,
and you're like, okay, I am going to be as polite and fatherly and distant as I can be because I don't want her to even get the slightest whiff that I'm trying to hit on her. Because I understand these things happen. I am mortified that she may by default perceive me as a person who would do that. But, rather than being defensive or offended at that, I'm going to overcorrect and, sit as far away as I can from her, not accidentally brush against her or anything, just like thinking, okay, how do I not make her think I'm going to do this? How do I not make her think I'm going to do this? And this is why Bill Skarsgård's character does that to the point of awkwardness where, he's like, okay, now he's overcorrecting. And trying too hard to make himself seem non-threatening, but he is, as it turns out. Bill Skarsgård innocent. He has done nothing and will do nothing wrong, and unfortunately ends up getting killed.
Yeah. Oh my God. This, I think. I've come up with an idea of what I feel like Barbarian is attempting as an allegory to be. This house is dating for single women. Sometimes you come into this house and you find yourself with a guy who overcorrects, who knows that he could be perceived a certain way and overcorrects, but is inherently trying to do the right thing. And you might have an attraction to him otherwise, but this unspoken thing that is really neither of your fault is still lingering in the room. And sometimes you get an AJ Gilbride who is just rotten to the core, but has the veneer of the nice. He is the nice guy, capital NGTM. And he is terrible down underneath. You never know when you step into that house what you're going to get. And if something bad happens to you in that house and you go tell somebody, they don't believe you. If you call somebody and say, something's wrong here, they're like, I don't think so. It doesn't seem wrong to me. People go out on dates every day. They don't always find murder basements. So you're on your own. And that is the divine joke here, folks. Dating is the Barbarian house. And I'm sorry to all of you who are still dating in that house. I'm dating. I have my own house and I try to keep that in order. And there's zero murder basements here because it's California. We don't have basements. I have a cement slab, everyone. We're on solid ground.
I mean, there could be bodies under the slab.
There's true, but I haven't put them there. That's the important part. I've implicitly gone out of my way to put them there. If they happen to be there, if this tract was built on a burial ground where they just moved the headstones and then they didn't move the bodies in poltergeist fashion, It is not an Indian burial ground, everyone. I guess people confuse it with The Shining in that respect. Is that why people do that?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, or no, Amityville Horror too. That's
Amityville Horror
yeah.
too. Okay, so it's a trope, and it's the one that kind of misses that exact trope, but people associate it with that anyways, I guess.
I mean, I was gonna say, you know,
and,
you live in Southern California, don't you all just like toss bodies like into like like you off of highways and like you leave them on people's front lawns? You know, I mean.
We were the serial killer capital for a little bit there, or at least the highest profile one. Certainly, all of the land here is built on blood. Let's put that to rest right now.
Yeah, I actually,
Patrick Hamilton not innocent when it comes to that, but I was born into this game. I'm trying to actively not continue it or keep the bodies piling up. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I've actually been reading a book about the hillside killers and or hillside stranglers, and I actually found myself reading it. I'm like, okay, I wonder how close Patrick lived to this one. You know?
So close. The Eagle Rock. They're in Eagle Rock.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning Eagle Rock, and I'm like, oh shit. Okay.
And
I mean, you were like,
I grew up in Glendale, so like the Eagle Rock Mall, is a very nice. It is a very. It's one of those quote unquote East Side neighborhoods. People get very bristle when you call it East LA for whatever reason. I'm gonna just believe them, but it is the East Side of LA, and it's very Tony now. It's kind of a bedroom community and whatnot. But the Eagle Rock Mall was like where I saw Jason Goes to Hell and where I bought my own copy of Stephen King's It. But it was also kind of always described as seedy in comparison to Glendale, whether or not it was, or, it was just the subtle racism of Los Angeles. I couldn't really tell you. But it's very freeway close, like the two, which is built there where they filmed Chips before it opened, and the 134 cross over that. So that aided and abetted their ability to get away with murder multiple times. That is a heinous pair, those two, the Hillside Stranglers. Oh my God. I went to a storytelling show and there was a woman who told a story about how her car broke down on the transition from the 110 to the 101 freeway. And it's a long, big curve. She goes to a call box, she calls in, and the person on the other line says, listen, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but if a person claiming to be a cop shows up with just a badge, even if they have lights on their car, don't open the window, don't open the car until you have somebody else there with you. And she's like, oh, that's strange. Just believe me. I'm not supposed to tell you this, but believe me. Lo and behold, she gets back in her car. Someone pulls up behind her. There's a single spinner on top of the hood, and he's not wearing a full uniform and has a badge and says, how can I help you? And she's like, I'm not supposed to. The call box person said, I'm not supposed to open the window, not supposed to open the door. The person who she contacted on the call box calls her parents, and her dad shows up. And as soon as her dad pulls over, the guy who's the cop runs away. Guess who that person was, Gina? The Hillside Strangler.
Yeah, I mean, you were like, we were literally like kindergarten age when this happened, so I doubt you remember any of it. But it's kind of and they have said why. It's because y'all are all highways out there, and it's
sure,
and it is fairly easy to get away. Whereas here in New York, you have to like murder someone and then get on a subway. Like, right. and it makes it a little harder to lay low. So most times you've had serial killers, it's people who had cars like David Berkowitz and Joel Rifkin, who actually lived outside of the city. So, here you're more likely to just have like one time, shootings, but not a serial killer situation.
It's not hospitable to that sort of thing, regardless of what maniac may be trying to tell.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the upcoming Scream. 2, 6, 58, whatever they're going to end up calling. Oh my God. The cops thing was so crazy and fantastic. And This is just a very well made, solid horror flick. And the characters are very well drawn. The confidence in which it's shot and lensed and edited is pretty great. And I can't wait to see what this guy does. Now, he had this script in the hopper, it sounds like, for nearly a decade before it finally got made. So I'm very excited to see what he comes up with after this. I don't know if he'll stay in horror or not, but considering this was made for 4.5 and it's made nearly 45 million, it's a 10 times multiplier. So I think he's going to be able to kind of do the things he wants from this point forward, at least within a certain budget range. It'll be interesting to see what he comes up with after this. This was a very fun debut.
And you know what? But you also know what the best part is? It won't be a sequel to Barbarian.
That's right. I love, speaking of, I love the aspect. This is a thing that people are doing more often. Perhaps it'll become a trope at a certain point, but I think it has a really interesting psychological effect on people. The aspect ratio change when the second we're stopping what we're doing, we're telling another story happens, and we go back to Frank and his reign of terror in Detroit, and it goes to a 4:3 aspect ratio. You're like, oh, okay, I know when this is now because of the aspect ratio. And he's buying diapers and plastic sheets. Oh my God. Gina.
And breastfeeding instructional videos.
Oh God. He says this to this clerk and she's like, oh, God bless you. Don't bless him. God has nothing to do with this.
And she's like, oh, is your baby a boy or a girl? He's like, not born yet.
Oh, criminy. Oh, Jesus. Just the fucking worst. Every part of it, when you think more about it, it just gets worse and worse. I have to laugh just to keep from crying is what it comes down to.
Well, when you mentioned the cops who just completely blow her off, and people, this brings us back to real life serial killers. The hottest serial killer boy in town, Jeffrey Dahmer, that dreamboat,
that notoriously smelly dream.
I like this one because he's got nice lips. I mean, let us not forget that one of his last victims, a child, a 14-year-old boy, escaped with a hole drill in his head, bleeding from a very delicate area, not a stitch of clothing on him. People called the cops to say, hey, we found this very young boy bleeding, looking like he's been assaulted by someone. The police sent him back to the man who had been torturing him and who killed him later the same night, laughing it off as, he had a fight with his boyfriend. And so, if you don't think that the cops are going to just ignore someone who has been the obvious victim of some sort of assault, telling you, hey, this person in, in 123, Main Street or apartment C on 10th Street has attacked me, and they're like, nah, we don't have time. We don't have time for this. They just put out fresh crullers at the Dunkin'. I mean, before you look at a scene in a movie and deem it to be implausible, try looking at a thing called real life every now and then.
Yeah. Yes. And I mean, that is the weird element to a lot of horror, is that it is the mirror that we hold up to society and demonstrate its extremes in semi-realistic fashion. It is why we crave it.
Right. And you know perfectly well that this homeless man has probably tried to tell them numerous times what's going on in that house. And they clearly never listened to him. They don't believe him because no one has ever investigated this house, apparently. So
Right.
he has just designated himself, well, I'll just hang around here and try to warn people from going into the house. And then he ends up paying for it with his life, unfortunately.
Right.
It just occurred to me. It just occurred to me. I don't even know why it's called Barbarian.
Well, I think my guess, and I certainly don't know this, but this would be my guess, is that it is not a noun. It is more a descriptor. That what has occurred there what has occurred there has been barbarian, as opposed to a barbarian, unless we're going in the sort of classical sense of a barbarian who comes into a space and destroys it and literally rapes and pillages, which you could say to a certain degree Frank has been doing that for quite some time. Have you ever seen Megan is Missing? No. Okay. It's not worth it. I don't know. It's hard to say it's not worth your time. There are people whom I respect who believe it to be a kind of a hidden lo-fi classic. But it is so incompetently made for the first section of the film, the first two acts, that you can't believe that anything that happens afterwards isn't just like a confession of a crazy person. It feels like Birdemic. And then Birdemic has some images that you fucking can't believe exist on film at the end of it, where it suddenly becomes competent in the most incompetent, it's an untrustworthy filmmaker. And then at the end of it, spoilers for Megan is Missing. If you've gotten this far into Barbarian, I think you can probably guess. Megan has been missing. She has been captured by a serial killer. She has been tortured and raped. She's shown with her head sticking out of an oil drum and her mouth forced open with these calipers. And you can imagine why. Then it ends with her inside this oil drum banging to be let out. And for 10 minutes, you watch somebody dig up a hole, then shove the oil barrel into it and start to fill it up. And you hear her screams the entire time. And I can't say it's ineffective. It's absolutely effective. But the entire film is so poor that for all of a sudden it to be effective, it feels untrustworthy to me. And because it's untrustworthy, I think it's effective. But I don't think it's a good movie. And this is the good movie version of that sort of thing, where it's about the reason it works is the person behind the camera is confident and they have written well-structured characters, and people you've seen all sides of them. And that skill transforms a movie from a simple premise to something that's pretty fucking spectacular.
It kept me on my toes the entire time, which I appreciated, because not a lot of horror does that.
That's very true. What a time to be a horror fan. So Josh Hollis does all of our artwork, and Revenge Body does all of our music. Go to Revenge Body Memphis at bandcamp.com to find this theme and all of our remixes. It's good stuff. Gina, shall we play Choose Your Own Deathventure? That's where we decide of the deaths portrayed in this film. If you were to choose one, which one would it be and why? We have your head smashed against the stone walls of a murder basement, and you can have your eyes poked out and head ripped open like your two separate bowling balls, or just get plugged after living a life as a crazy mutant inside said murder basement, or you take your own life in that same fashion with that same gun, or you can have your arm ripped off and are beaten with it. So those are your choices. Gina, what say you?
I mean, my first thought is, I guess, having my head smashed would be, all right, because, he probably goes pretty quick. But also he was pretty terrified up to that point. So I don't know that I would want that. So probably just shot in the head.
Yeah, no, I'm taking getting plugged. Even if I'm letting Bebe know that it's okay and I understand. Oh my God. Even the unintentional physical villain, if we're talking about it in James Bond terms, has a, like, at the end of the day, like, it's all this individual knows, but even that individual recognizes that what they're attempting to do is mother instead of being a monster. Oh my God, Gina, what a film.
To me, that's cinema.
Yeah. Yes. And of course, horror's great villains, Justin Long's eyeballs. At least now it happens in a film we can have fun discussing because it's not connected to a real life crime. Yes. So there we go. We got that going for it. Don't worry if you don't recognize that reference. It's not something you want to learn about. So just fucking let it go. Gina, where can people find you on these here internets?
I write about movies and television at thespool.net. I am on Twitter under Gina Does Things, and I have a newsletter in which I wrote about my feelings on Barbarian. It's Gina Watches Things.substack.com.
Excellent. People, you should be reading this stuff. Gina, I, of course, your words are what made this podcast happen, because I read your stuff and I said, this person gets it. And guess what you do? So if you are not signed up for Gina's Substack, I would encourage everyone to do so. It is a wonderful pleasure to read your work. And of course, you can find us on Twitter still for now. Facebook. This is a cavalcade of bad places to be. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Believe it or not, TikTok. I put my fucking face on there. I got so angry about someone claiming Steven Spielberg directed Poltergeist like a fucking asshole. No, he did not. Stop saying that. And our Patreon, we're doing fun stuff. We talked about Black Roses last month. And of course, by the time this comes out, our Halloween Ends commentary will be available for all to listen to and enjoy, in quotes. And that just about does it for this week on Kill by Kill. What's in the future? Well, we had all sorts of plans, and you know what happens when man plans, God laughs. So here's the deal. We are going to have Saw's Giving. Saw's Giving is going to happen. We have a guest for Saw's Giving. We are going to have some shows. Whether or not we make it out every single week will be up for some debate. We have been well ahead of the curve when it came to this, but as it gets close to the holidays, our time is somewhat strained in both locales. And so we were never intended to be a weekly podcast, but we're going to try our best to do so. There might be some Patreon releases. There might be a week or two where we just don't have a show. It's not because we don't want to. It's simply because we're having difficulty in terms of scheduling a weekly podcast. But we love you all, and we want to occupy your time and your ear holes, and we're going to try to be back as often as we can. But we will always have a show every other week. That is the Kill by Kill promise. We're going to show up every other week, we promise. So for myself and for Gina, bye-bye.
Bye.